Please comment where you are watching in the world. Please become a channel member to support us, and share your dating horror stories to us via our subreddit in the description. Now let's dive in. I met a girl online. She seemed normal enough, so we ended up going out for a drink. I found out that night that she actually lived an hour away in a rural town, but whatever. Well, we went out, had a drink, then went to go play pool. We drove over in my vehicle, and when we got to the pool hall she checked her phone, and saw she had a text from her ex-BF. She proceeded to cry incessantly. I was trapped. I didn't know what to do, so I offered to take her back to her car. She said she wasn't sure if she could drive, and she asked if I would take her home. I declined, saying it wouldn't be a good idea because A, her car was like a mile away. B, she lived an hour away. C, how in the hell did she plan to get to her car the next day? So she agrees for the night to end, all the while apologizing vigorously. The next day she texts me, apologizes, and offers to buy me lunch. She seemed alright when we were getting to know each other, and I was bored, so I figured what the hell and gave her another shot. She brought her kids to the lunch. When I saw them get out of the car I texted her, and said that it wasn't okay for me to meet them. She became irate, and said her sitter canceled at the last minute. Even though the drive was an hour long from her house, she didn't find it important to ask if it would be weird for her kids to come. It was at that point that I stated I was no longer interested. Now for the creepy part. 2 days later she texted me, but I didn't respond. She kept at it, and kept asking if I wanted to go out the next weekend. After multiple texts I messaged her, and said I wasn't interested, and I had plans to take my friend out for her birthday. This resulted in even more irate messaging about how she wasn't comfortable with me going out with other girls, and so forth. This resulted in her getting blocked. Turns out she took a guess on where we would go, since there was only one nightclub in the town, and she showed up. I had to tell the birthday girl that I was leaving, and to call me when she was ready to go. My night was ruined. Birthday girl got home okay, in case you're wondering. But wait, there's more. A couple of weeks after that there was an ice storm, and the power had gone out in the area. I ended up going over to a friend's house to hang out, since they had a generator. We were playing cards and enjoying ourselves. Suddenly I get a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Are you alright? I'm really worried," the message read. "I'm fine, who is this?" I replied. "It's creepy girl," she responded. I ignored it and put my phone down. The next message sent chills down my spine. "I'm really worried. I'm standing outside your house, and all the lights are off. Are you sure you're okay?" She had never been to my house, and I had never given her my last name. My final message before blocking her involved not contacting me, or I'd call the police. It turns out she was a secretary or some shit for a police department, and she ran my tag to find out where I lived, drove over an hour to my house in the midst of an ice storm, then got a new number all so she could check up on me. Now to answer a few questions. This all happened 6 or 7 years ago, so not recently by any stretch. While I can't prove she ran my plate, I was using a Google Voice number attached to an email address which didn't have any of my personal information, and was used for this very purpose. Joke's on me, I guess. I found out she worked at the police department through simple conversation online. We talked for about 2 weeks before meeting, so I knew where she worked among other things. I didn't turn her in, and I won't. She was a single mother, and the father of the kids was in another state. She had supposedly been abused, and turning her in would have gotten her fired and or arrested. While I realized what she did was illegal, I didn't feel it would be right to put those little kids through that. I have no idea what she did with the kids during the ice storm. Her parents lived in the area, so I assume they went there. I have no idea where she is, but I'm pretty sure she's no longer at the police department. I'm fine and haven't heard from her since. I also don't live at that house, so surprise visits probably aren't a thing. Like many other unfortunate souls, my non-existent dating life has me turning to the dating apps. This particular one is from Tinder. I'd been chatting with this guy a few days, and everything was going swimmingly. We had so much in common, and were looking for the same things. His pictures were cute, and he didn't live too far away. All seemed well. I invited him over to grill out some burgers in my backyard. He asked if he could bring anything. I said sure, bring some bacon for the burgers. He agreed and said he'd be over soon. Given his distance, I expected him to be over in 15 minutes. I started the grill and seasoned the burgers. Half an hour later he messaged me. "I've driven by a couple times and chickened out. Are you sure you want me to come over?" Maybe a red flag, but I chalked it up to nerves and just said, "Come on, I'm hungry." So this Hagrid-looking guy shows up, much different than his Cedric picture. That's all right, I can move past that. From the minute he walked up, and I kid you not, he did not take a breath. Within the first 5 minutes, I knew his life story from his aunt, who hated their grandma, to his father, who likes to collect taxidermy. Not a single breath. Again, I figured he was just nervous. I put the burgers on, and when they're ready, he pulls out a Ziploc from his pocket with 2 pieces of bacon in it. He puts them only on his burger. Okay. We sit down at the patio table to start eating. I finished my burger before he even started his. He did not stop talking the entire time. When we sit down, he reaches into his pocket, pulls out a vial. It is about 2 inches tall with a cork in it. It's filled with black powder. He must have noticed me staring at it, flipping between if he was about to snort something strange or build some sand art. He said, "Oh, all super casual. I'd like to introduce you to my mother." I just stared at him for what felt like an eternity. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry or run. I like to bring her to any important event in my life. She also has ashes in this necklace I'm wearing, and in this ring I have on, and this half-sleeve tattoo is for her. Now mind you, I've lost too many people close to me, and I do not judge people based on their grief cycles. We all cope differently, and I respect that. But homeboy brought a vial of his mother's ashes, and set them on the table for our first date. I simply could not. He finally finished his burger, and I made some excuse about having to clock in and finish some work at 9:30 p.m. He texted me before he even got to his car and told me, "My mother really liked you. I can't wait to see you again." I told him I didn't feel the connection to him or his mother. I've got 2 stories. First one was when I was 15. I was walking past my school and about to cross the road when a trio of drunk women in their 40s or 50s started hassling me about how good I looked, pressing me in against the wall, and surrounded me so that I couldn't get out and holding me back while they copped feels. Not a fun experience, especially when you can't even tell people about it or how creeped out it's left you, because as a guy you should somehow be proud when women 3 times your age are grabbing your D through your trousers against your will. The other one was about 4 years ago. I was 22 and asked a girl I'd met out. She seemed nice at first. Met her in a little cafe while I was waiting to meet some friends, and we got talking about Pokemon and some other stuff for 20 or 30 minutes before adding each other on Facebook. Only weird thing was that in that time, she told me she'd been attacked by her ex. I thought maybe she was just being open about it as a way of dealing with the trauma, so I let it slide and messaged her a bit later to see if she'd be interested in a date. She told me that she already had a boyfriend, but that she'd love to hang out as friends, which was fair enough. So I agreed to that, and we met up a few days later. She'd brought her boyfriend with her, which I expected. I got the sense he wasn't too comfortable with me, which I can understand, but what threw me was she also brought her ex. I can't 100% say it was the same ex she'd mentioned, but he really gave off that vibe with the way he talked and behaved around her. She kept on talking about dead babies and abortions obsessively as well. You couldn't change the subject at all. Creeped me the hell out, so I just sat there with a smile and acted civil while internally going, "Please don't kill me." And I haven't spoken to her since. A story to add I knew from a friend. I've had a couple semi-stalkerish women who creeped on me, which is weird because I'm not even good looking. But my favorite creepy girl story was just a one-off funny moment. When I was 22, I was hanging out with a couple friends just grilling and drinking, when one of them was suddenly like, "Do you guys want to go to a costume party?" Naturally, we were like, yes. So we slapped together some quick costumes and hopped in an Uber. We showed up to this place, and it was less a costume party, and more 6 people in an apartment wearing costumes. But there was beer and a dog, so I was happy. Anyway, we spend the evening playing board games with this group of people who seem just as confused as we are. The entire night, there's this one girl who's sitting next to me on the couch, but she hasn't said a single word. Not one. I don't think much of it. Some people are shy, it's whatever. But then, during a lull in the party out of nowhere, she gets closer to me, looks me dead in the eye, and whispers, "I like blood." Then shifts back to her spot like nothing happened. I turned to my friend and was just like, "We have to leave." I still think about that night sometimes. I was 18 and competing in a fighting tournament. As I'm milling about between fights, this girl appears by my side and inserts herself into the conversation. It doesn't take long to realize she was trying to get my attention. I play coy and continue talking as if she wasn't there. It's awkward, and I don't know what else to do. So she escalates by clinging onto my arm, which I immediately break and inform her I have a girlfriend and am not interested. Before she can respond, I'm called for my next fight, and after the fight she goes right back to trying to get my attention and latching on to me. I tell her to stop and walk away to another group of friends and competitors. After each fight, she is right there waiting for me and doesn't seem fazed one bit that I'm doing my best to ignore her. This continues all the way until my last fight, and I'm done being polite. Both myself and my opponent made it to this last fight undefeated. It was a long, grueling, evenly matched fight. As we are both nearly exhausted, he throws everything he has left into one strike. It connects and I'm down unconscious. Girl rushes in and tells my friends and the marshals that she is my new girlfriend and that she will take me to the hospital. Even though they were skeptical, they let her lead me away. I came to a few hours later. As my days started to lift, I found myself in my bed, naked from the waist down, with her baked and bouncing on top of me. I have no memory of how I got home, or how long it's been. She notices I'm starting to become lucid again and speaks to me, but I can't understand. I'm so confused. I try to speak but can't. This is right about the time a friend comes by to check on me and see if I made it to the hospital. When nobody answered the door, he let himself in, and I'm so glad he did. My friend lays into her and shames the F out of this girl and demands she leave immediately. My homie knows me and my girlfriend, and he isn't buying her claim that we are a couple now. I'm still very dazed when we get to the hospital, where I'm diagnosed with a severe concussion. While coming to with a stranger, putting me inside her was FING traumatic. The real trauma for me was telling my girlfriend. I was in tears, apologizing for cheating on her. Back then, most were of the mindset that it's impossible for a man to be attacked, and that if it happened it's because the guy wanted it. It took me a decade to realize that this was the R word. I cracked a joke after telling this story. If you reverse the genders, this story becomes totally fucked up. I said with a laugh. And the sudden realization, it was fucked up no matter how you slice it. My girlfriend was very understanding, however. While neither of us recognized it as this, she forgave me, and we moved on with what would be an 11-year relationship. I forgot to include a detail that would highlight what a creeper this girl really was. My friend later told me that she sat on my doorstep and waiting for a ride to come pick her up. It was her 28-year-old boyfriend. She was 16. Gross. It isn't so much a creepy girl story as it is a weird girl and her creepy mother. I'm from Sydney, Australia. Her name was Shelley, and I dated her for 8 weeks back from January to mid-March 2013. Her mother Jane took an instant dislike to me, and from what I can figure out the mom and daughter were working together trying to frame me for sexual assault, theft, burglary, trespassing, and a bunch of other things. Her mom told me a bunch of really weird things about Shelley. Shelley is a trust fund kid and is extremely stupid with her money. It's really easy to manipulate her and get her to sign over the rights to her money. One drink and she passes out. She tells me her and Shelley's daily routine down to the minute. She keeps $500 cash in the Bible, and that she has a bunch of diamond earrings she inherited worth thousands of dollars hidden in a drawer in the spare room. She also tells me there's a spare key hidden in the garden gnome in the front yard, and a bunch of weird things like that. I assume their plan was to give me an idea to break into their house and steal things. One of the first dates, Shelley drank really heavily and passed out. I took her to hospital and said I live 5 minutes away. So instead of worrying her mom, can you just ring me and I'll pick her up? The mom found out and accused me of trying to change her next of kin details in the first step to try and get her inheritance money. Another time, Shelley suspiciously left her expensive cashmere wool jacket, bag in her purse, which had a fair bit of money in it too, $800 if I remember correctly, at my house while she went to stay at her cousin's house 90 minutes away. Of course her mom found out. Jane rang me demanding her daughter's things back. I said I'll give them back to Shelley when she gets back. She then said no, I need to give them to her tonight, and that I need to drop them off at her house. If I don't, she'll be around to my house with the police and have me charged with theft. I hung up the phone and messaged her saying that she is more than welcome to come around and pick her daughter's things up, but otherwise to leave me the fuck alone. She messaged I need to drop them off at her house, or she'll get the police involved. I messaged back pick them up at my house or wait until Shelley's back, take it or leave it. Her daughter rang me 10 minutes later, saying I'd better not damage her stuff, or Mum says you'll have hell to pay. You break it, you bought it. I told Shelley the same as what I told her mum. Her mum is more than welcome to come around to pick them up. But I'm not dropping them off. The mum came around to pick them up the next day, but before she did I asked her to write me a note saying the jacket and bag isn't damaged, and the money is all there, or I'll only give them to her daughter. I had the MP3 recorder on my phone recording the conversation. The phone was in my pocket, but she didn't know what I was doing. She wrote a note saying they weren't damaged and the money is all there, and I asked her, so the things look good and the money's all there? She replied in a bitter tone, yes. You're lucky this time, SK 1711. I got her on tape admitting everything was in good condition and the money's all there. I think her plan was to get the clothes, bag and purse back and damage them herself, and say I stole her money as well, and then blame me and go to the police about it or small claims court or something like that. Luckily nothing came from it though. There's no way ID forgot my wallet if it had that much money in it. Hell, I wouldn't even have that much cash on me. I'd keep it in the bank and get it out of an ATM. And if I'm only 90 minutes away, I'd drive back and get it. Another weird thing Shelly did was ring me and say that her brother rapes her all the time, and she's been raped twice this week by him. And that whenever she tells her mum about it, her mum just laughs and says you're imagining things. I actually knew her brother and had him on Facebook and know for a fact he wasn't in Sydney, nor has been here for over a year. He lived on the other side of Australia. He's in Perth, which is on the other side of the country, and he hasn't been in Sydney for over a year. Americans. That's like me living in Jacksonville, Florida, and Peter living in Los Angeles. It sounded really odd, so I left it alone. I think her plan was to get me to tell the police or something like that, and then her mum would sue me for defamation of character. Another odd thing was neither Shelly or her mum had Facebook. The final straw was she told me and Shelly that she was going interstate to visit her sister for 2 days. She knew that I would go over to her house and try to spend time with Shelly. I did go over that night, and at around 11 p.m. she messaged her daughter, saying that she arrived at her sister's house 3 hours away. Literally 5 seconds after she got the message from her mum, Shelly got really touchy-feely and kept insisting we have sex. I thought it was a bit sus or weird, so I said let's just watch the movie and we'll have some fun after it. Literally 5 minutes after Shelly started making moves on me, her mum quietly opened the door and snuck in the house and came into the living room and went, "Ahu, keep your hands off my daughter." But all I was doing was having a coffee with her daughter and watching a movie. I asked her, "Aren't you supposed to be at your sister's house?" She said that's none of your fucking business where I'm supposed to be. I grabbed her daughter's phone and showed her the message saying that she arrived at her sister's house, and she just told me that she doesn't have to justify herself to me and to get out of her house. I then said the both of you are fucked, and I want nothing to do with the either of you. Shelly, we're officially over. I think her plan was to catch me having sex with her daughter or accuse me of rape or something. As I was leaving the house, her mum told me that she was going to get me into a lot of trouble for all the inconvenience I've caused for her. The police came to my house a week later and said that Shelly's house has been broken into and a bunch of her stuff was stolen. They also said that Shelly, Jane and their neighbor have seen my car driving up and down her street 3 nights in a row. Her neighbor supposedly saw someone the same height, size, and hair color as me dressed entirely in black in Shelly's backyard the night they were broken into. Here's the good part. I was actually doing night shift the entire week and was at work and on camera the entire night they were supposedly burgled. The times my car was supposedly seen driving around her street, I was also working. Witnesses, camera, and GPS on my work car proved I was at work when they supposedly saw my car driving up and down their street. I told the police this and gave them my boss's number so they could get GPS printouts as well as camera footage of me. The police proceeded to do so, and that's all I heard of it. Shelly rang me 4 days later and told me she found her diamond earrings and was really sorry for any inconvenience she's caused me. She sounded really worried too. I assume the police threatened to charge them with making a false report. I think it hit her what sort of shit she could get into filing a false police report, and that I could potentially sue for defamation of character. After everything I went through, I wanted nothing to do with them, so I just let it go and have absolutely nothing to do with them at all. I rang Crime Stoppers, which is like a tip line for the police, and told them what she said about her brother raping her, just in case it has happened in the past, and she was telling the truth. Last year I dated this one girl for a few weeks. She was a nice girl, but there were some obvious red flags that slowly cropped up over the weeks. Overall, it was because she had absolutely no life, no interests, no friends, and she had close to a tantrum when I tried introducing her to my friends. No hobbies besides reality television, still working at her high school fast food job despite being 32. She was upset when we broke up, but overall didn't make a huge deal over it. She wanted to stay in contact, but we lost touch almost immediately, as I did not want to drag anything out. 6 months later I was back to dating, and had made it official with a different girl. While out at a friend's house one night, I decided to take a selfie of us and throw it on Facebook. In the morning my girlfriend alerted me to a nasty comment left by the previous girl. It was middle school level stuff. She outright insulted my girlfriend, saying literally, "Ew, she has big teeth," adding that she thought she was going to have second chance with me. Keep in mind, we had absolutely zero communication in those 6 months. Never once did I give her the impression I was interested in seeing her again. I was super pissed at her for the teeth comment, and my GF was a little upset, but at least we've gotten a lot of laughs out of it since then. Glad I dodged that bullet. I'm actually sparing you guys a ton of details. There were lots of tiny things she did while we were dating that made me realize how much of a loser she really was, but I don't have time to type up an entire essay on it. To follow up, I'll share some more details. To be perfectly honest, I actually left out all the details that made her creepy, and not just some asshole girl. Met this girl through online dating. She's cute and friendly. First 2 dates go smoothly. She's a lot less wild than me, but otherwise nothing awkward. She told me she wanted to get married at her great-uncle's church, by her great-uncle, pushing like 90 years old. I told her I'm agnostic on the first date, but for the right person, I figured I could warm to the idea. Hey, gotta be flexible in dating, right? Third date it gets weird. She asked me to go to church with her one Sunday. Her great-uncle's church. Also, it turns out the church staff is pretty much most of her gigantic extended family. Her great-uncle delivers a sermon about how hell is a real place, and you will go there if you sin. Meet like 15 of her extended relatives. They're all super friendly in that stiff church-wide way. I have the social skills to schmooze with strangers easily, but I was deaf uncomfortable. Plans are for a corn maze after. This was September, with her co-workers from her fast food job. On the way she tells me she thinks we're ready for the L level. Yes, that's how it was phrased. This is when sirens start to flash red. Told her I wanted to wait and see. At the corn maze, her co-workers are all in their early 20s or younger. We are probably the 2 oldest people there minus their supervisor. I attempt to socialize. She does not. On the way home, asks if I plan to be at Thanksgiving with her. Remember, this is September still, and our 3rd date. I remind her that this is our 3rd date. She barely knows anything about me at all. She really didn't. And that I'd think about it as the day approached. Tell her the next day via text we need to pump the brakes. She understands, but then follows up saying she's looking forward to our journey together. Sirens flashing louder. I tell her how important my friends are to me. Like, I constantly see a large circle of people across multiple days of the week, pre-quarantine. I told her on our first date that the make or break was if she could be friends with them too. Start to notice she never mentions any of her own friends. 5th date, introducing her to 4 of my friends. Not just nervous, but has a mini meltdown. Take her to my room so she can calm down. Starts to sing songs from The Sound of Music, her absolute favorite movie, to try to self-soothe, yes really. She gets freaked out by my friend's tattoos. The tattoo in question was a sleeve of Tetris blocks. Yes, we are very dorky people. Final date, she takes me to a huge benefit event for one of her cousins who died. Meet like 30 more extended family. Literally get introduced to all of them, and then we make no attempts to socialize with anyone. I can't handle that type of boredom. I point to a table of people around our age with a bunch of beer cans at their table. Looks like they're having a great time. I believe she called them the popular kids, and doesn't want to go over. She is 32 years old. Asks me if I want to make it official, and reminds me that she doesn't break up with her boyfriends. Later on asks what a reasonable timeline is for when couples should move in. Breakup call happened the next day. I know looking back at all of that, most people would have left before all that. Truth be told, she was my first real attempt at finding a long-term partner after having dated very few people over the years. I wasn't really sure what to expect, so I was trying to be as flexible as possible. Also, I don't think she really knew what she was doing was weird and pushy. I got the impression she was from a very traditional family, and had her own set of ideas of what dating was meant to lead to, and was just pursuing that end. I think in her mind, things like a career, passion, or friends just wasn't as important as starting a family. I also suspect she stopped growing personally around high school, because she never had to push herself while waiting for Mr. Right. When she wasn't doing her weird shit, she was a decent person to be around, before she insulted my girlfriend, that is. And she was pretty good in bed, surprisingly. I'm a girl. This situation happened with a crazy girl my boyfriend used to date. My BF and I met on Tinder and became exclusive after only a few dates. I asked about his past relationships, and he said he recently dated someone casually who had the same name as me, very common name in the US. He said it wasn't serious and she was never his girlfriend, but apparently she didn't feel the same way. We ended up moving in together 8 months later. He moved into the apartment where I was already living alone for a full year. Guess who taught at the studio right across the street from my building? Yes, ex with the same name. Randomly I get a Facebook message from this person telling me to stop stalking her and to tell my BF to stop parking outside of her work. The message also said to stop purposefully walking my dog outside with my boyfriend holding hands on a specific day when she was always working. I showed it to my BF immediately and didn't respond. She had messaged him too, but he didn't see it, basically saying the same thing except crazier. She waiting like 10 minutes for him to respond before messaging me, even though I've never talked to her in my life. She then said her dog died and her dad died, and all these things to get him to feel bad for her after SHE accused US of stalking her. My car ended up with some scratches that looked deliberate on it that I can never confirm was actually her, but both of our cars were always parked outside of our apartment and in view of her work. I still wonder if it was her. We moved buildings shortly after, but stayed in the same complex. Another story. I knew this girl for a few years, and she always seemed nice enough, I guess. We were never really friends, but we ran in the same circles. Anyways, she was really heavy and very short, and just not in any way my type, and she'd come on to me a few times when I was in a relationship, and I used that as an excuse because I didn't want to be mean. Anyways, eventually when I was single I was at this local bar dancing with some friends, and she comes out of nowhere and starts aggressively trying to grind on me, so I go to the bar. She follows me there, grabs my ass, and starts like stroking my chest. At this point, I tell her I'm not interested and walk outside for a cigarette. When I come back in, she starts trying to dance with me immediately as I pass through the door, and I tell her again I'm not interested. So she grabs my cock and smiles and asks, "What's wrong?" I shoved her off and told her to leave me the F alone, and then I went to another bar. About a month later I saw her post on Facebook about the patriarchy and how creepy men are, and how women need to fight back against men who are groping them in bars, which is exactly what she did to me. I wanted to make a comment, but I just deleted her and blocked her instead. FING, crazy goblin lady. After college, my mom tried to get me to go to Christian meet and greets all the time, so I could meet a nice Christian girl. She went hard on this Thursday night barbecue social that her friend Sandy's kid went to regularly. They have barbecue and lots of attractive girls, she said. It sounds like church. It's not church, she said. It's just a get-together. I decided to go out of boredom. It was totally church. But she wasn't lying, they did have good barbecue, and surprisingly a lot of good-looking women in their early 20s. I met one girl named Charlene who was 22, very good-looking, long brown hair, great smile, also funny and engaging. A little too super into Jesus for me, but I thought that wouldn't be a problem. I was wrong. Very wrong. I said, "Listen, I am never coming back to this thing, can I get your number, and just you and I can hang out?" She gave me her number, and we agreed to go out that next Friday. I picked her up on the day, and we went out and had a good time. When I brought her back home, I leaned in for the kiss. She kissed pretty passionately at first, but then suddenly pulled back. I said, "Is everything okay?" She said that was the first time she had ever kissed someone. I said, "What did you just say?" She said that was her first kiss. I was flabbergasted. 22 and very pretty and seemingly normal. How had she never kissed anyone? I said, "Oh, why?" The next thing she said was one of the creepiest things I've ever had anyone say to me. She said, and I quote, "I was saving myself for you." I didn't know what to say. I just sat there for a minute. It sounded so desperately creepy. And this was our first date. But what could I do? I just said, "Oh, well that's good." And then we sat there in silence, and I said, I really need to go." It was so awkward and creepy and weird and cringy, all those things at once. She got up and slammed the car door and ran to the house. I blocked her number and ghosted her and tried to forget the whole thing ever happened. Fast forward to 5 years later. I was married and my wife and sister-in-law and I were going to see the old youth pastor from their hometown, because he and his wife just had a baby. It's a dark hospital parking lot, and we get inside to the elevator, and someone runs in and says hold the door, and she gets on the elevator. Never fucking turns around, just stands there the wrong way looking at me while the elevator door closes. She says ask_me_for_a_story. I said yes. She says, it's Charlene, I say. OHO. Oh no. She still doesn't turn around as the elevator is going up. My sister-in-law goes, do you two know each other? Charlene goes, yeah. We dated. I wanted to crawl inside my own skin. My wife holds out her hand and says hi, I'm his wife. The worst elevator ride of my life. We get up to the maternity ward and the door opens and she finally turns around. Guess where she is going? Same fucking room as us. She knew the pastor's wife. Terrible night. Awkward as fuck. She was still as weird as she was on our first date, except even more into Jesus. So to sum up, I took a super religious girl's mouth-tongue virginity on our first date, and then she said she was saving herself for me. Ghosted her and ended up having to sit in the same hospital room as her for 2 hours one night 5 years later. I was in my third year at college and had just become the president of the anime club. Most of the members had graduated last year, so I was determined to recruit as many new members as possible. And my way of doing that was to befriend them and give them more of a reason to show up every week. But that backfired with one woman. I'll call her Paige. Paige was a freshman, and according to others, was in love with me from the moment she met me. Shortly after the semester started, it had gotten out that I'd broken up with my girlfriend over the summer. What hadn't gotten out was that the reason I broke up with her was because I finally came out as gay to myself. Only 3 people knew at that point, my 2 best friends and my ex. Now that the club knew I was single, there were apparently a few girls that had a thing for me. Because Paige actually started a fistfight on campus when she overheard another club member say she was going to ask me out. The only reason I knew this was because one of my best friends was actually in the bathroom when it happened and was the one to call campus security. But that wasn't the end of it. Whenever the club members ate lunch or dinner at the student commons, Paige would make sure to sit as close as possible to me and would laugh way too hard at everything I said and touch my arm/shoulder/body as many times as she could. She even went so far as to put her hand on my inner thigh once. She would have gone all the way to the groin if I hadn't stood up and walk away. She then chased after me and forced her arms around me and wouldn't let go until I accepted her apology. When I would hang out with other club members, she'd always find out and force herself to come along. Me and my best friends had a tradition of watching Disney movies every Saturday night to de-stress and would invite other friends to it. So of course Paige showed up. She also would make sure to comment throughout the whole movie about how she was like the princess/heroine and I was like the prince/hero. She'd also make sure to slowly scoot closer to me throughout the movie. When we watched Brave, I got up and changed seats 3 different times just to get away from her. She even showed up outside my best friend's dorm room when it was just me and 2 friends and basically forced her way into the room. My best friends had known about my run-ins with Paige ever since the hand on the thigh incident, so they ended up hanging out early just to get rid of her. Paige even started hanging out my dorm building, even though her dorm was on the other side of campus. I used to just keep my door propped open because the AC sucked, and then my other friends in the building could just drop in whenever. But ever since the first time she waltzed into my room, I stopped doing that and made my friends text me when they got outside. I also wore headphones whenever I was on my laptop or listening to music, because if Paige was outside and heard movement, she would hang on the door until I could text my floor's advisor to get rid of her. About halfway through the year, she asked me when I was going to ask her out, and I straight up said never, I'm gay. And her response was, oh, I can fix that. Enough was enough at that point. I had come out to a majority of my friends at this point, so I got them all together and told them about everything to do with Paige. They formed the Anti-Paige Defense Squad and made sure that whenever we were out in the club at lunch/dinner or just hanging out, I would always have the seats next to me filled with one of them. There was actually a time when we were at Dairy Queen and she literally popped into existence next to our table. One friend even started throwing herself into my lap whenever Paige showed up, just to try and deter her. Paige didn't give up until the end of the year. It was finals week and I had an 8 a.m. final one day, so I forced myself to eat breakfast that day, even though I normally don't. I found only one friend for breakfast, and we grabbed a table far from the entrance and out of view. Regardless, Paige found us and announced her finals were already done and would be moving out of her dorm today. She forced me to promise her that I would be there to see her off. Obviously, I didn't and stayed with a friend off campus until the end of the day. I also blocked in my phone and ignored her FB friend request since I no longer had any obligation to her as club president over the summer. I moved off campus for my 4th year and found out that she had moved into the dorm I'd previously been living in, so I don't think she gave up right away. One of my nosy friends is still FB friends with Paige and keeps me updated. Paige had started dating another guy from the anime club a few months into her 2nd year and eventually married him in her 3rd year. He's actually 7 years older than her, and we know he used to beat his old girlfriend. She even posted to FB, right, she lost her virginity to him in detail. We even found out they have a kid on the way, so even though none of my friends nor I like Paige, we hope that she and that poor kid aren't going to be in any danger or taken advantage of. Bonus, Paige was going to be a teacher, but she was fired from her job as a lifeguard/swim instructor at the university pool because she couldn't handle children in a professional manner. Plus, she got caught shoplifting from the student store once, and her reason being that since she was going to be a teacher, she needed to get those bad impulses out of her system now. Double bonus, that girl that Paige got into a fist fight with, she asked me out during my 4th year of college in front of the whole club. That's when I formally came out to the entire anime club, not just my friend circle within the club. My time to shine as I seemed to attract lunatics. When I was 16, a friend of a friend, 28 female, added me on Facebook. She then sent me nudes. Being a hormonal teenager, I thought this was cool. Until she started messaging me every day, even when I'd be in class to chat and send nudes. She called me on Skype and would be completely nude every time I answered, but would then threaten to throw herself in the ocean should I not answer. On the advice of a much older peer, I blocked her, because someone your age shouldn't have to deal with that. And then for the next year I had to block her every time she sent a friend request from a new account. 17 years old, I had a girlfriend, 17F, who seemed cool at first but transpired she had a drug and alcohol problem and a bipolar disorder. Whenever I wasn't in sight or making my exact location, known she would accuse me of cheating. Sometimes even when she knew where I was, e.g. work, school, etc., she would do mental gymnastics to tell herself the reason I didn't message back was because I was texting other women. She didn't even like me spending time with my own sister. That relationship ended with her accusing me of cheating, then locking herself in the bathroom and opening her arms and neck up with a piece of broken glass. All superficial and a cry for attention. The last one that springs to mind is when I was working as dishwasher in a hotel at 19 and a waitress, 31F, added me on Facebook during my first shift. At the time I thought she was just being friendly, but she started messaging me after shift that same night to flirt. Every shift after that I worked, she would make comments and do things that weren't appropriate, like comment on how she liked dudes with long hair and start running her fingers through mine, touching me in no places. The final straw was when I was trying to check the rotor for the week, which was hung up in the pantry, just before you get to the changing room/toilet, and no one ever really goes in there unless it's to use the facilities or get something for prep. And she backed me into a corner, wrapped her arms around my waist, and tried to kiss me. I pushed her away, told everyone what had happened, and she had to quit because she got bullied over it. Unfortunately, management didn't take it seriously. I probably have more, but that's all I can think of right now. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. One more story I know of for you all from a friend. I was 19 at the time, and a lot more talkative/actively looking for a girlfriend. So I was kind of a fuckboy until I experienced this. I was talking to this girl on Facebook, and she seemed cool. She said she was 19, had a car, and a job. She said her car was in the shop, which happens. I didn't think much of it at the time, and ended up staying the night. I recently lost my minimum wage job, so I had free time and didn't mind the company. She would ask if I wanted her to stay another day or whatever, and I was like, "What about your job?" She said she switches shifts with her friend all the time. Which, again, at the time I thought nothing of it. One thing that I noticed was she was afraid of horror movies. I thought that was weird, but I figured it's a girl thing. She stayed for a few days, and randomly at like 4 a.m., she said her friend was picking her up. I was surprised because there was no talk of it or build up. This is where it gets fucked up. I'm scrolling on Facebook. There's a missing person report for her. She was 15. Obviously I had a panic attack and connected all the dots. I blocked her on everything. Time passes, and I run into my uncle at the bar. He's talking about this horrible mother that has whore tattooed on her arm, and that she has a daughter, and it was that girl. I held it together. I started breathing heavily. I didn't tell him anything. I just acted interested in the story. He says something along the lines of, that girl sleeps with guys older than you. Now I have severe guilt, self-loathing, and major trust issues. Crippling alcoholic. I stopped using the internet to talk to girls. Reddit is my only social media. I've been single ever since and haven't dated anyone in years with no intentions of dating, because, people are crazy enough to fabricate an entire life. So years back I decided to head up to my old town to surprise some friends and hang out. It was a Saturday and I had no plans, so I figured why not go surprise some buddies and chill for the weekend. I drove up to my friend's house to find they were all out dirt biking for a few hours, and I was going to have to wait till they got home. So I'm sitting on their porch smoking a cig while I decide how to best waste some time. I popped out my phone and started mindlessly swiping on Tinder. Suddenly, I match with this girl and her first message says, "Hey, I don't normally do this, but you're really cute. Let's hang out." Now, I'm the kind of guy who prefers to get to know someone before I immediately go out on a date with them. But I was bored and had a few hours to kill. Plus, what's the worst that could happen? Oh, how wrong I was. So this girl invites me out. I ask where she wants to meet, and she says she's currently drinking at a bar downtown. I think that's a little odd. It's 1 p.m. on a Saturday, and you're already out drinking? But then again, it is a college town, and it's probably not a big deal. Red flag number 1. So I hop in my truck and head downtown. I arrive and head in to meet her. A little nervous because I hardly know this person, but I'm optimistic. She spots me from across the room and comes over with 2 drinks in hand. She walks up, slams one of them while giving me the "wait just a second" sign with her finger, then slams the other drink and leaves her empty glasses at a random table. She then pulls me in and gives me a big hug and an even bigger kiss right on the lips like we knew each other or something. Red flag number 2. This girl is already pretty tipsy, and I haven't even had my first drink, and it's maybe 1 or 2 in the afternoon. Also, who immediately kisses someone they've never met. Again, I'm being optimistic, so I think maybe she's just having a good time and maybe I shouldn't overthink things. I tell myself to lighten up and just have fun. I don't normally party like this. Maybe I'll learn a lesson on how to let loose. So we chat for maybe 15 minutes. She explains she and her siblings have been at the casino all day, and they're out celebrating because they won like $30,000. Then she says, "Oh, speaking of my siblings," and walks me over to the bar to meet them. So we just met and now I'm being introduced to her family. It was weird. We walk over and her 4 sisters and their 4 significant others are all hanging out at the bar. They all half-heartedly say, "Hello," but I can tell they really don't care who I am. She then says she'll be right back, orders 2 drinks, slams one, and runs off to go dance to the next song, leaving me with her siblings. So I'm trying to make awkward small talk with these people, and starting to think maybe I should just go because I don't exactly want to hang out with this girl's family, and some red flags are starting to pile on. Then, one of the siblings walks over and asks the bartender for 2 shots. Oh cool, I think. This dude can see I'm feeling a little weird, and he's gonna give me a shot and try and make me feel a less awkward. Nope. The bartender passes him 2 shots. The sibling looks at me and says, "Yo, you with Tiffany?" "Yeah," I reply. He slams both drinks, slaps me on the back and says, "Good luck, buddy," and disappears off into the crowd. Red flag number 3. Well, fuck, I think. Maybe I need to reconsider what I'm doing here. As I'm trying to decide if I should go, some commotion breaks out on the dance floor. Apparently, Tiffany was dancing away, and some girl knocked her drink out of her hand on accident. Tiffany went into a drunken pushing/yelling match with this poor girl, and caused enough of a scene that the music literally stopped. There's lots of shouting and yelling, and my Tinder date is doing all of it. She's making a huge deal and throwing fists with this girl and her friends over a spilt drink. Red goddamn flag number 4. All these drunk girls are now in a 5-person fist fight, defending their friend, while Tiffany is going drunk Hulk on all of them. At this point, I recognize it's my time to leave. So I did. I went straight out to the curb, lit up a smoke, and stood there trying to figure out how to spend the rest of the afternoon. As I'm doing this, they threw Tiffany out of the bar. I've never seen someone be physically thrown from a bar, but damn, that girl could really fly. 2 big bouncers straight up tossed her to the curb, while she's screaming and spitting at them and crying. At this point, it's like watching a car accident. I just couldn't look away. Her siblings come out seconds later and start yelling at her. "You always do this. We were just trying to have a good time, and you always get fucked up and ruin it. You have a drinking problem, and a slew of other things." Then, they say, "You're on your own tonight. Find your own ride home," and her siblings bail. Now at this point, Tiffany, whom I've talked to for pretty much 15 whole minutes, is a crying mess on the curb. I feel so bad for this girl. Obviously, she made some crappy choices that led her to this moment. But she's also a person who's having a really rough afternoon, and is now very alone and possibly too drunk to make better choices that will lead to her getting home safe. So, I decided to go talk to her and calm her down. She's still crying and having a rough time of it all. I offer to walk around downtown with her for a bit, so she can sober up and maybe we'll find her a cab or something. As we're walking, I can tell she's getting progressively more drunk. But she's obviously not drinking anything, so I'm guessing she probably slammed a few more drinks than I thought. Then she's puking all over the curb, and she's barely able to stand. After everything, she's still a person, and I decide there's no way I can put her in a cab when she can barely stand. Not to mention she's puking so much, the cab isn't going to let her go alone. I decide that I'll take her home, where her roommates or siblings or whoever can deal with her. Lucky for me, this town is small, and it only takes 15 minutes to get from one side to the other, so I'm sure it'll all be over soon. Nope. We get to my truck, and I help her in. I ask her where she lives, and she says something about the north side of town, but she was slurring her speech so bad I didn't really catch it. No problem, I think. I've lived on the north side too, and it's a small area. We'll figure it out. It takes maybe 10 minutes to get to the north side, and the whole time she's puking on my floor and out my window. She is fucked up. I'm already pretty irritated because I just wanted a nice afternoon out, but it'll all be over soon, and I'll never see her again, I think. Then she falls asleep. I pull up to the first neighborhood on the north side and start asking her where she lives. She's still asleep. I try and shake her awake. Nothing. She is full-on ragdoll passed out. So I pull into a Circle K, get her some water and a Gatorade and try to wake her up. Eventually she comes to, pukes some more and downs the water, add the Gatorade. I ask where she lives again, and she manages to point down the street before passing back out. So I'm driving up and down this neighborhood. At each new street, I'm shaking her awake, asking her where to go. She sometimes opens her eyes enough to look around, shake her head and fall back asleep. I drive around the north side for a full hour. She's woken up a few times, pointed at a few streets, puked more than once, but mostly slept while I'm driving around asking her where to go. Plus, she's pointed at multiple places that weren't even close together, so I wasn't even sure if she knew where we were. Finally, a full hour of this goes by. My truck is covered in puke, and she sits up, points to a house and says, "That one," and then proceeds to puke even more. Ick, how this girl even had this much vomit in her body. I am exhausted. I pull up to the house and park, go around to her side, and it's pretty clear she's not going to be able to stand. So, I tell her to puke out what she can before I carry her inside. She does, and I throw her over my shoulder. We get to the door and I knock a few times, but no one answers. So I just let myself in. I figured at this point, I've dealt with this girl's drunken ass enough, and my patience is gone. Whatever siblings or roommates are there will surely be grateful I got her home safe. So who cares if I just let myself in? I get her to a couch and put her on her side. I find a pot from the kitchen and put it in front of her in case she's got to hurl again, as well as a glass of water and some Alka-Seltzer. Then I find a linen closet and get her set up with a blanket and a pillow. After that, I left and headed to my friend's house to tell them about the worst date I have ever had. Then, the next morning she calls me, absolutely infuriated. She's yelling at me, and frankly I'm completely confused. Finally she says, "Why the fuck would you leave me here of all places?" Me, dude. We're lucky I even found out where you lived. You were so plastered it took me an hour to even get you home. Her. But I don't live here. So it turns out that 2 years prior, she had a best friend and a fiancé. A week before her wedding, her best friend and her fiancé ran off together and eloped. She hasn't seen or spoken to them since. That was the home I apparently dropped her off at. They were out of town that night, and came home the next day to find her passed out on their couch with puke everywhere. I imagine it was an eventful reunion. Anyway, she asks me to come take her home, and frankly, I was so done with that mess I declined. And that, my friends, is the story of why I decided to delete Tinder from my phone and never go on spontaneous dates again. To summarize this long story, I spontaneously met a girl for a date. She was plastered and ended up being thrown like a sack of potatoes out of the bar. She was ditched by her family, and the universe gave me the get this drunk girl home side quest that turned into an hour of vomit, tears, and frustration. This happened the year I turned 21, so taking her to a hospital was not my first thought since I was new to drinking and had no idea how to recognize alcohol poisoning too. She left her purse/keys/belongings at the bar because she didn't have time to get it when the bouncers threw her out. I was not aware of this till the phone call the next morning, but part of the reason she had called the next morning was to also ask for a ride downtown to get all her shit from the bar. 3. People don't lock their doors in small towns. Flagstaff, Arizona is a pretty small town. I never locked my door when I lived there. Small town people can confirm. At the time I had no idea the situation I was in, but after I reflected on it some 10 years later, I realized I kind of lucked out and things could have gotten weird. My best friend's older sister, about 4 years older, had a friend that me and my best friend thought was so hot, dude, and we both had crushes on her. I was over his house a lot as we grew up a few houses away from each other. After I had interacted with this girl a bunch, we got to be friendly, but I was still this awkward, small, 12-year-old who didn't know how to act around girls. One day we all were running around the house playing with Nerf guns or something, and it was boys versus girls. I ran into my best friend's sister's room to take cover, and the sister's friend ran after me and closed the door behind her. She wasn't fat, but she wasn't a small girl, and I was 100 pounds soaking wet. Somehow she had tackled me onto the bed and had me mounted with my arms pinned to the bed. I still remember the look on her face, and I quickly became super awkward by the attention and the position we were in. I didn't feel like I was in danger or being attacked, mostly because I was internally freaking out at a girl being in this position with me. Then my friend came busting into the door and immediately pointed his Nerf gun down and went, "Whoa." We both turned to look at him, and I said something like, "Help. She's got me," in the sense that he needed to help a teammate out in the game, and he just ran away. During the distraction, I managed to squirm out of her grips and also run, and we kept the game going. It wasn't until years later I wised up about assault and randomly thought about it one day when I kind of had a light bulb moment and thought, oh shit. She was totally forcing herself on me. If the friend hadn't come into the room, I have no idea what would have happened. Very well could have been nothing, but judging from my memory, it very well could have been a sort of predatory, older girl wanting to show the young inexperienced boy a good time kind of thing. Which is pretty gross when I think about it. Not quite sure if this qualifies, fits more into my cringe category, but I had a girlfriend in college who I dated for about a year and a half. She seemed cute and normal when we first started dating, but as time went on she got more manipulative, controlling, and just outright unhinged. Here's some of the highlights, lowlights. She was religious, but told me she didn't mind that I wasn't. Then later said the only reason we had sex was because she knew I'd break up with her if we didn't. She was the one who aggressively initiated and didn't even ask to know my thoughts on that question. She also started to strongly insist that I go to church with her family. Unless she was friends with a girl we both knew as well, all of my female friendships had to stop. She used her ex as the reason for this, but it's really because she had severe trust issues. She was pretty crafty about this too. It wasn't a don't talk to her. It was a, I just don't trust her, and I don't know what she would do, or I think she likes you, and was always able to frame it as every girl she didn't know was just a potential bomb waiting to explode. Tied to the note above, she would message her ex all the time, and saw nothing wrong with it even when I told her it bothered me, and that she was being a hypocrite. You can imagine that conversation was super duper productive. The day before we were supposed to fly up to meet my parents, she went out with a guy friend from her childhood and a couple of girlfriends. She ended up getting so drunk that she stopped returning my phone calls and just sort of disappeared. Eventually I went looking for her and found her, which was crazy on its own because it literally was like finding a needle in a haystack, and all of her explanations of what happened didn't add up. I'm pretty sure she just wanted to go hook up with him now in hindsight. Also, when I told her I was just going to fly up alone if she didn't show up and not go looking for her to basically show her how upset I was that she would be so reckless the day before meeting my parents, our flight was early. She accused me of being a terrible person that doesn't care about her and put the blame of the entire night, including her drinking, on me. When I went to be an instructor for an army training event, she called me at 4 in the morning crying, saying she'd been raped by her ex. Later, after we'd broken up, a friend saw her at a bar, started talking to her, and then the rapist/ex showed up, and she greeted him with a big hug and smiles. My buddy looked at her and was like, "Wasn't that the guy who raped you?" And she just sort of twitched around after that because she knew she'd been caught. She tried to tell me people were calling her at all hours of the day saying I was cheating on her, but they wouldn't identify who they were. My best guess is this was her fishing to see if I'd cheated on her. I was out of town at this point. She broke up with me 3 months into being stationed to a post just south of the DMZ. I finally felt the relief of it all and was happy it was over. A week later, she tried to get me to get back together with her, saying that I never even fought for us. I flat out declined. 2 weeks after that, her mom texted me saying she's really hurt. I basically said something like, "That's not my problem." Her mom was happy to accept that answer. She never liked me because I wasn't a Christian. This might not seem that bad, but she knew I had 0 friends and was struggling on my own. Due to military structure and rules, there were literally only 2 other people I could be friends with in my situation. One wasn't even on our installation, and the other was, to be nice, a guy I simply did not want to be friends with. So it was basically just me. A bit of background info about me. I didn't have the most loving upbringing, so I was pretty ripe to accept subpar behavior at the time if it meant someone loved and cared about me. But things did and do get better. I'm happily married now to an amazing woman, so no worries there, friends, smiley face. Therapy is the best. Met a girl when I was a senior in college that was a junior. We hung out a couple of times through mutual friends, and, while I wouldn't say hit it off, she was fun to be around while drunk. That led to us making out one time while drunk, and it wasn't pleasant. Honestly, I can't recall what was wrong, but I remember it being disgusting for some reason. I do remember she really wanted to hook up, and I didn't. It had come up in conversation previously that she was a virgin, and on top of the makeouts being gross, I just didn't want that sort of responsibility, so I started distancing myself. I told her I wasn't interested. The day of our next mutual friends get-together came around, and she called. I wasn't screening her calls or anything, so I answered, and she was being highly pushy about whether or not I'd be at the party that night. So I decided I'd be better off having a chill night and playing whatever the new Medal of Honor was with a buddy. So I said I wouldn't be there. She did not like that answer, and got downright aggressive with why I wouldn't be there. So I informed her that I wasn't feeling very good, and that I think I was coming down with the flu. I try not to lie in social situations like this, but I didn't really want to hurt her feelings with a, "Hey, you're being oddly pushy about this, and I'd rather just be somewhere you aren't." I eventually placate her enough that I'm able to hang up without hanging up on her and go about my day, casually playing video games. Later that night, however, my friend and I decided to walk to the local corner store for some snacks, and as we left the front door, there was a whole Tupperware full of soup on my doorstep. Okay, that's sweet, you might say, but I never told this girl where I lived. And further, she clearly knew that it was a bit creepy that she was dropping soup off at my place when I hadn't told her that. But why is it better that she dropped it off and didn't knock? That was a bit over the line for me, so I had to call her and thank her for the soup, but also tell her I really wasn't interested in pursuing anything romantic at the time. How dare I infer that from her friendly gesture, etc., etc. So I ghosted her. She called every day for a week or 2, and while I never noticed her show up at my house, but I'm sure she did at some point. About 2 months later, she called me at 1 a.m. Enough time had passed that I picked up, knowing full well she was drunk dialing me. She was in tears, and her friends had left her at a bar. That whole group was drama, so this wasn't surprising. I had been having a pretty low-key poker night, so I agreed to go pick her up and take her home. Only when I picked her up, she wasn't satisfied for me to be taking her home, so she started crying at me that I didn't love her or some shit. Keep in mind, I was trying to take her home, and she started accusing me of trying to take advantage of her, and that I needed to stop the car right away or she was going to call the cops. I tried to get her out of rougher side of town, but she was in hysterics. So eventually I relented and dropped her off in a bank parking lot. My thought process being that the security cameras could at least keep watch over her while she called a cab, and in the future I could point to the security footage as evidence that she wasn't forced from the car. Against my better judgment, I called her later that night to make sure she made it home all right. She did. That was the last I ever heard from her. A similar story I would like to share. A co-worker was 4 years older than me and showing interest in me romantically. I worked in a fast food restaurant, and was sent to work at a different store 45 minutes away a few times a week. The girl used to work at my store but was fired some time before I started, then got a job as a team leader in this one, but still lived in my town. So arrangement was I'd get up at 6 a.m., she'd come pick me up, and we'd both go to this other town and work until at least midnight, and often until after 1 a.m. Everyone who knew her warned me not to let her get her claws on me. Weird. Strange wording. Apparently, she was definitely going to try to get me to sleep with her. One of my best friends worked there too, and was her ex. But I hadn't spoken to him much since he was working 80 hours a week, and I was at university before I took a year out. So I was loyal to my friend, and wasn't going to do anything to hurt him. I dismissed it. No, she wouldn't try anything. Anyway, the first shift I didn't drive up with her. She showed up for the evening shift and drove me home. Her first words to me were, "I'm not as bad as everyone says I am," and I instantly panicked. After a few weeks, she was like my closest friend. The person I spend the vast majority of my time with, and I really liked her. As a friend. Turns out she was interested in me, but I didn't reciprocate. Then one day she suggested I go out with this other girl working there, who was 16, and we'd be so cute together. I asked her how old she thought I was, because I was nearly 21. She was a little embarrassed. I got a million stories about this girl, but after a few months I stopped going up. Everyone in both stores, except for me, hated this girl. But I understood her. I heard her side of everything. Hell, I knew this girl better than I knew anyone. We've spent so much time together, just talking. She knew me as well. But because she was the ex of a close friend, and they hated each other. So nothing happened, but there were a few close calls. Anyway, I left that job, AMD. A few months later, she raped a 17-year-old and fled the country. He got 35 grand from the restaurant. I was at a party in college with a big group of our friends. We see this girl there that we knew from our dorm building the year before. My roommate had had a huge crush on this girl the year before, but she told him she wasn't interested in dating. Otherwise, she had always been a nice person and fun to hang out with. Anyway, this girl sees me and says it's good to see me, asks how I've been, etc. We talk for a bit, then she asks if I want to step outside while she has a smoke. I said sure. It was hot inside and I wanted to step outside. We talk for a bit. Go back inside. She asks me to play beer pong with her. We win 3 games in a row and is always super excited when we make a cup. I kind of wanted to leave, but we kept winning games. Finally we lose, and before I can say anything she grabs my arm and pulls me outside so she can smoke again. At this point I really want to leave. She was nice, but she had been a bit too touchy-feely, and I wasn't interested. I also wasn't feeling that well. I had an upset stomach. Additionally, I didn't want my roommate, who was at the party, to think I was interested in this girl, because he used to have a big crush on her. We go back inside after she smokes, and I said, "Hey, I'm not feeling well. I think I'm going to head out." She acted like she was heartbroken. She says, "Here, put my number in your phone, and call me so that I have your number." She put me on the spot, so begrudgingly I did it. I quickly grabbed my coat, told my roommate about the situation, and that I was trying to avoid this girl, and we both left. I got back to the apartment and signed onto Facebook to talk with friends. This was before Facebook had chat for mobile, and people were chatting on the Facebook Messenger on your browser. Shortly after, creepy girl messages me on Facebook. She must have left the party immediately after I did, because she was now sending me Facebook messages, again, before Facebook Messenger mobile. I don't answer and close out Facebook. Then she texts my cell phone, then calls me. I continue not answering. Over the next 20 minutes I got 7 calls/texts from her that I was not responding to. Finally, the texts and calls stopped. I leave my room to go get a snack, and my roommate, we lived together but slept in separate rooms, says, "Hey man, I'm sorry, but I told creepy girl like a year ago I'd teach her how to play guitar. She's taking me up on that offer now, and she's coming over." I felt bad saying no. I figure if you just hang out in your room it should be fine. I told him about all the texts and calls I had just received, and he was like, "Oh no, that's not good." This girl had guilted my roommate into coming over so she could see me. I hide in my room with the door locked, and hear her knock at the door to the apartment. My friend lets her in, and they talk for a few minutes. Then she comes to my room and is knocking on the door and jiggling at my door handle because she wants to say hi. My roommate said, "Hey, he's not feeling well. I think he's sleeping. Let's go hang out in the other room." They hang out in the other room. It's quiet for a while. Then I hear her go use the bathroom that is next to my room, and when she's done she tries knocking on my door again and jiggling the door handle. After 5 minutes or so she gives up and goes to hang out with my roommate again. Quiet again. At this point, it's 1 or 2 a.m. My roommate texts me an hour or two later saying that creepy girl asked if she could sleep on our couch because it's late and cold outside, temperature was in the single digits, and she had a long walk back to her place. He felt bad, so he told her she could stay. He gave her a pillow and a blanket to use on the couch, and put her to bed. Just 2 minutes later, she's knocking on my door and jiggling the handle saying, "Please let me in. Please." I ignore her and try to be as quiet as possible in my room. Then she's calling and texting me to let her into the room because she's cold. The heat was on, it wasn't cold. Eventually it stops and I fall asleep. When I woke up in the morning, she was gone. I thought all was fine. After I talked to my roommate, it turns out that she eventually gave up on me and then made her way into my roommate's room and hooked up with him. He felt kind of ashamed that he hooked up with her after being her second choice, but he used to have a big crush on this girl and gave in. Anyway, I texted her and told her to never contact me again. I never heard from her or saw her again after that. To summarize, I saw a girl I was acquaintances with at a party. After hanging out for a bit, I left. That same night, she tried contacting me 7 times with no answer, so she leveraged her friendship with my roommate to get into my apartment anyway. From there, she tried to get into my locked bedroom multiple times throughout the night while I was hiding in there. I have a few stories actually, but I'll tell you about one that I haven't told many people outside of my circle about. I'll try to keep it somewhat short though, even though I'm notoriously terrible at doing that. Anyways, let's move on. This happened back in early 2018. I was a horny 18-year-old at the time, and I'd been on this weird hybrid social media / dating / kink site for a few months. I made a status that was kinda stupid. I forget what I even said, but this one older chick, 46, from the Northwest somewhere sent me a PM about it and mentioned she always enjoyed my sense of humor and wanted to be friends, but she understood if I didn't want to talk. I told her it's okay and that I appreciated the compliment, and we got to talking innocently for a while. Just some really low-key stuff, honestly. I can't remember everything obviously since it was a couple years ago, and that part of our conversation didn't stick out from all the others I'd had on the app. It didn't take very long for things to get sexual, and being an attention-starved 18-year-old dude with some pretty low standards and not really knowing exactly what I wanted out of a romantic relationship, I guess I kinda just let it happen. We did some ERP, erotic roleplay, together, and it turned out we had a few of the same major kinks, so it was fun. After we had enough of a bond over that shit, we talked about each other's lives and situations a bit to get closer. That's where things started getting a little weird. So she told me that she had 2 sons, both of them older than me, but one was a lot closer in age. I mean, that's not really weird by any means, but she mentioned that she had a big thing for guys who were younger, and she made sure to put emphasis on how much younger she was into. It didn't really sit well with me at 18 that this chick was into guys around her son's ages, but I let it slide. Horny and confused are 2 emotions that don't really mix very well, especially in younger dudes. It was extremely conflicting, but like I said, I didn't really make it into a big deal at the time. I can't remember the order of these next 2 events, but I'll try my best. A few days later, she asks me, "King, I need to know right now, are you really 18? So I told her I was. She said, "I just wanted to be sure, I've been lied to before. A guy told me once a couple years ago that he was 18, but after we had sex I found out he was really 15-inch, and at that point I'm thinking, okay, maybe he did lie, but it's still pretty weird regardless." I think at that point it was starting to register with my hormonal-ass brain that something wasn't right. I was still dumb about it though, and I didn't break any contact, since at that point in time I was thinking I'd actually be able to sway my parents into taking me up to where she lived because of a college there that I wanted to check out, and maybe I'd get lucky one night. That's a long story in and of itself, but I don't feel like explaining my history with college and all that shit on here, so I won't. She messaged me later and said something along the lines of, "My entire week has been unproductive. I can't think about work at all. I've been thinking to myself, I want King and lots of attention, lol." I got some creepy obsessive vibes from that. I don't know what I said in response, but we eventually had another RP where she told me, "You're making me want to kidnap you so bad right now. If you come here I don't think I'll ever let you leave." Yeah, that would have been endearing if it was coming from someone who I didn't think was actually going to try and go through with it unironically. The whole thing was just getting to be too much. The obsession, the creepy messages, the fact that she fucked a dude below the age of consent, etc., etc. A few days after I was contemplating telling her I wasn't interested, she tried to bait me in further by saying, "You know, King, all the other 18-year-olds I've met have seemed more like kids than adults. Is it weird that I see you more as a full-grown man?" And looking back on it, in cases where the main goal is sex and not a relationship, I should have realized people who say that tend to be predatory as hell. I broke contact about a week later, and I haven't heard of her since then. I'm 21 now. I haven't tried to think too much about her. A few years back, my first GF broke up with me and cheated on me. So I was down, and after a few months I tried dating apps. I am 27, and back then I was 20, so Tinder etc. was not that huge of a thing back then and here in Europe. Well, I met someone after a few tries, and we dated and got together after a few dates. It all went really well in the beginning because we spent time together and we had spare time. Also, we both wanted the best for each other. After approximately 2 months, it all went downhill. Really fast. She wanted me to spend 8 days a week with her. She got jealous over all of my friends. For example, I met an old classmate after a few years, which is male. No offense here, I am a straight guy FYI. And she started writing and calling me like crazy, and I asked if anything happened. She said no, and then I was wondering if we can't speak later. Well, she had a fight with me over the pick the friend, and I took of our reunion, and having a nice day. She also got abusive and made fun of me and my hobbies. Once I was helping out in a small festivity in my town, and made good money for working 3 days straight. She called me every 5 minutes what I am doing, and when I come home. I then told her I am at work and I will turn off my phone now, because she is annoying as hell, and I am super busy. She insisted on coming to the place I worked with a friend of her. I said alright, but I don't have time to come out, just to say hi. She and her friends started drinking and 2 random dudes tried to hit them up. She called me again billions of times. I was literally freaking out and telling her if she doesn't stop I let security take her away from here. After work I was going to her place and wanted to ask what this all was about and why she would drink with a stranger. And then she, her girlfriend, and the 2 strangers are coming, and the 2 dudes start shouting my name and all, and I was so pissed off I wanted to leave, and she started a fight that they didn't hit up on her. I was like, yeah, for sure, and if I would have done that, she would have let hell loose. She said it would be different if I do that. The best things are yet to come. She locked me up once in her room and flat. I was shouting for help and called my brother, and she threatened me. I was never get physical or anything, but I was needing help. And after that I broke up with her. I told her mother I can't bring up any more energy for this, and I wish the best for her. She understood me and was such a kind person. Well, and my then ex threatened me to kill herself. She wrote me everywhere possible and asked me to come back. I told her one final time I won't, and why in a kind way. She wrote me she takes drugs because her friends tried to help her to overcome me. I was telling her that doesn't make things better, and that her friends are shitty if they support you like that. Now, here we go. Only a few weeks after that I was away with a group of friends eating and drinking in a pub. It was a super funny night, and then on my way home I was called by a stranger. I was picking it up and asked who was there, and the stranger started saying, "Oh hey," wrong and shorter version of my name. "Can you remember me? We exchanged numbers when we were smoking at the club last time." I was thinking, okay, wrong number. "Hey there, wrong number. I hate that place and I don't smoke. Sorry, but good luck next time." I was getting off the train, and then I got another call by the same number. I was like, WTF. Picked it up and told him that he is definitely wrong, although he was drunk or something. He then told me, "Hey, I am a friend of your ex. She feels horrible and asked me to talk to you and to make you overthink to come back to her." I was so upset and pissed off. I shouted into the phone in the middle of the night, "Listen up, buddy. Nice try earlier, but I don't care who you are and if you buy her all the drugs. So don't fucking call me again." I was seeing people while I walked home in the distance in front of my gate. I was having a bad feeling and called my family to please pick me up at the stop. They did, and those guys got off really quick. I locked the gate and saw a plant and a note lying there on our ground. I got her that plant. The note said, F****KU and your stupid flower and your stupid fake presents you made. At this point I said it is enough. Stalking is absolutely not funny. I called the number back, and then I freaked out really bad. "Listen up, mate. If I ever see you again close to my house, I call the cops. I have evidence of her threatening me online, and with phone calls, etc., and also evidence you bothered me multiple times. And the note in the plant. Not so smart. I will tell this all to the police. I hope you regret it all now." After that, I haven't heard anything of her. But once I was working in a restaurant at the bar, and she and her friends came there to eat. It was weird, but she told the guys I was her weird ex, and they started bothering me, and I had to get the whole group to get thrown out, and they are not allowed there anymore. I have a few bad dates my younger days. One girl locked me in a bedroom and wouldn't let me out till I agreed to have sex with her. She was far too drunk, and there was no way I was even going to entertain it. I can't quite remember the pretense of being lured into the room, but once in she made it clear she wouldn't let me out without sex. This was really scary at the time, not that I couldn't physically move her, but she wasn't acting rational. One wrong claim or shout, and she could have said anything in revenge. She ended up sitting at the foot of the door, which opened inward, and refusing to move unless I agreed. I simply waited her out. She sobered up and apologized, and then acted like nothing happened. The second was one in high school. A girl I liked stayed up all night talking at a house party. Nothing more than that really, but we were alone in a shared bed. It felt like a really nice night. I was perhaps expecting the next day to perhaps see her again, or maybe ask her out properly. Unfortunately, a lot of people made assumptions about what had happened. Assumed we did more than just have a conversation and a nice time. Then all of a sudden I had a white knight try and have a go for spreading lies about her. He was a fat fool who shat himself, as she was never interested, and not only didn't anything happen, she was well out of my league, and we weren't even in the same room. Which was just nonsense. But fine, you move on. No skin of my nose if she didn't want a second date. But the accusation that I had spread lies about her, that we had sex or whatever, when in actual fact it was her own friends that had got all excited about it in the morning, and made 2 and 2 equal 5 really bothered me. To the point I was genuinely terrified for years that she could have claimed anything had happened, and there would have been enough circumstantial evidence for something to stick. The hatred she held for me from that point on made no sense too. I have also had a girl I met online, and was dating, who would come into the men's toilet and hold my pee whilst I was urinating. She wanted to see how big I was, and thought I should be really appreciative of her coming in and just grabbing me without warning. She was also keen to offer me a BJ in the cubicle, but it was a grubby pub toilet, and she was not someone I really wanted anything to do with after a few weeks due to her craziness. Again, for weeks, I was then the target of her abuse. How I must be gay for turning her down. I had eyes, that was enough. Still tried it on every time though, especially once she had a drink in her. She would continually put her hand down my waistband and try and grab my bits. Grab my hand and shove it up her skirt or onto her breast. Really, really creepy stuff. No one cared, it was all a joke. Lots of guys saying just go with her, but I knew she'd be a limpet. I didn't want a relationship with her. Yes, I could have taken an easy hump one night or two, but that wasn't what I wanted. If I remember correctly, I was attracted to another lady at the time, but this girl wouldn't give me a minute to speak to her without jumping in and marking her territory. But women can be as creepy as men. The difference in my situations is I was never physically scared. However, the power they all held to claim what they liked cannot be underestimated. The fear when you are trapped in a situation by a lady who can scream any accusation, during or a long time after an event, can leave you powerless at times and shouldn't be underestimated. I'd lose my job, my relationships, claims of where there's smoke there's fire, etc. would never leave me. Women can abuse that, and it can use it to their advantage too. But some women, just the same as some men, just won't take no for an answer. I sorta had a stalker. Wasn't scared for my life, or anything really, she was just an inconvenience, and made hanging out with a friend a bit challenging. In the early days of online dating, my friend goes out with this girl, they don't click, but he thinks me and her might. I go out with her. I'm not saying she was naming the kids by the end of the first drink, but I kinda got the impression there were names bouncing around. Nice girl, but she just seemed overly assumptive about the future. This was happy hour with apps and drinks, and she's talking about people I'll meet soon. And when we do this next thing next Tuesday, and in month we will. So I did the early 20s thing where you don't know how to express discomfort well, and ghosted her. Maybe 2 months later my friend mentions, hey, I ran into that girl, I needed a roommate, and since neither of us worked out, guess who's moving in tomorrow. Awkward, but his house, his roommate situation. And that's where things started getting a little odd. She starts mentioning a boyfriend she has now. At first I thought it was like, hey, I'm off the market thing. But the guy was never around. Then anytime I showed up to my friend's place, which was a couple times a week, we lived a few blocks away from each other, she just happened to be in some state of undress. Her room was right off the front door, so I'd knock, be told it's open, and oops, her door is open, and she's putting on a shirt. Or she's just headed to or out the shower, and in nothing but a towel. She'd sometimes corner me in the kitchen in said very small towel. Like she was a slim girl trying to use a washcloth as a body towel. At first I thought it was just odd timing, but it happened literally every time I came over. I mentioned to my friend as a have you ever noticed thing. He said it was in my head, then towards the end, he finally said, yeah, maybe it wasn't. She was a runner. I saw her outside my apartment a lot. Maybe. I mean, I lived in a runner's neighborhood, lots of people pounding the pavement. But I didn't see a redhead on my street until she moved into the area, and didn't see one for a long while after she left. Still runners going to go up and down blocks. But I ran into her every time I was at the grocery store. My friend was a few blocks away. I had other friends that lived in the same apartment complex. We'd lived that close for years, and running into them was a rare occurrence. She was at least weekly. I'd run to get something I forgot, and bam, she's there. It was like she lived in the grocery store, and just popped out some hide hole when I walked in. And of course we'd have to have a chat, and she'd need something on the aisle I'm going down. Everything came to a head at a party after she'd been roommates with my friend for about 6 months. I'd started having my friend come to my place more for hangouts, but the party was at his, so she was invited living there. She shows up with the boyfriend. I ended up in a convo with him, and found out it was the first time they'd really hung out, so... Anyway, she spent the entire party getting in my face about drinking her beer. Basically ignores the guy she brought, and is hovering around me. Anytime I start talking to another girl, boom, she was there. Meanwhile, it's the dude she brought downing her beers. Eventually she realizes I'm not biting, and nopes off to her room with her friend. I make the mistake of getting a little too drunk to walk home, and pass out in my favorite chair at my friend's place. I wake middle of the night, her door is open, and she's just dead-ass staring me down while riding the guy she brought. I fake going back to sleep. She has the most fake porn orgasm I've ever heard. I waited till I heard her door close and snuck out to walk home. Told my friend I'm sorry, but I'm not hanging out over there again till she's gone. He had rental agreement and was stuck with her. Once I stopped showing up 100%, she stopped paying rent. He had to go through a whole eviction process, which takes forever in my state. I was part of a group with the woman and several other people. I won't name what we did, but let's just say it was in the space of performing comedy. I didn't know her or several of the other people ahead of time, but as I got to know her, she turned out to be really funny and excellent performer at what we did. She was a real pro. I personally am drawn to competence and talent, so we started hanging out. This was right around the time between Christmas and New Year's, and we would plan some events for the whole group, knowing that we were the only 2 members in town. So we wasn't so obvious to either of us or anybody else what was happening. We went to a movie totally platonically. We went to a nice Asian fusion restaurant platonically, and I invited her over to my house to watch a movie platonically, but with the intention of checking things out. This was like 3 days before New Year's. I will say that things went well, and then it's the only time in my life I've actually done the cliched thing of going on a date, bringing that date home, and then having sex with that date. The afternoon of New Year's Eve, she texted me the innocent question, "What are you doing for New Year's?" Which I took as an essentially platonic question, just asking me what I'm doing. I had been invited weeks earlier to go to the New Year's Eve / housewarming party that my friend, female, was having at her new house. So I told her that's what my plans were. That became the first in a really long line of horrible text messages that realized I'd done the wrong thing with my penis, and I was being punished for it. Her position was that since she and I had had sex, my New Year's plans should be with her. Well, I was able to talk her off the ledge, but I didn't change my plans, and she managed to get herself disinvited before I was going to invite her to the same event. But I don't negotiate with terrorists, yada yada, so I didn't invite her. Things calmed down after that, after she realized I wasn't cheating on her, even though we were not in any kind of declared relationship. We were meeting at my house every week, and after we were done, everybody would take their stuff, put on their coats, and leave. And this one person would do all of that, walk out of the house, pretend to be leaving. Then when everybody was gone, she would come back inside, and we would do the funny bunny. That was pretty much our entire involvement. We didn't actually do anything socially together outside of my house, I think. Anyway, she was getting out of control, and I finally had to break it off with her, so I had a clear heart-to-heart compassionate conversation with her, and she seemed to understand, and then pretend like I didn't exist, and I mean like physically I didn't exist. She stopped speaking to me. She wouldn't even look at me at the times we had to have some interaction. And then, The texts. So, we're broken up. I'd elected to step away from the group that we were a part of, because I felt she was more important to the group than I was. So we really were not seeing each other at all anywhere, because I was also avoiding the community where we would perform. The texts she sent were vile. They were just horrible things about me that were not based on any specifics about me. Like, we didn't really spend that much time together, and really didn't know that much about each other, but she did that thing where she would just describe some other person she must have known, and then say I am built like that person. Every week or two I would get texts that she had figured it all out, and then roll off a conspiracy that most typically was about how I was cheating on her and with who and how I was doing it. I mean, I guess I was a little bit flattered that she thought I was just getting that much ass and have the luxury to make a girl like her just another piece of ass in my harem, despite my behaving in no way that would indicate I regarded her like that. She would make mistakes in logic so large that they were like a gotcha in a government hearing. Like, she accused me of dating her only to make a prior girl I had dated jealous. Even though that other girl broke it off with me, and was also completely unaware of the relationship I had going on because girl I was really seeing and I were actively keeping it a secret from everybody but ourselves. I continued to get texts for months, and I would respond to them, always trying to make things better, or explain something so she didn't feel so hurt, things like that. This Buddhist guy I was talking to in a little bar and explained the situation to, because I was being bombarded by texts as we were sitting there, pointed out to me that on some level I actually liked it, and I know he was right. I have enough training in related areas to know what he means. Basically, I was getting something out of it, or seeking to get something out of it, which was to first off be important to someone, secondly to try and preserve my good guy image, so that nobody ever in the world says something bad about me face with rolling eyes, and helps me keep my attention off of my own sense of loss and bereavement, not just about this relationship, but about all the relationships. As kindly and compassionately as I tried to treat her, I just knew I was not cut out to be one of those people that's abused by their partner verbally and or emotionally, and I wasn't really interested in that, so the Buddhist's advice was to simply stop responding to the texts. He rightly pointed out that I was just giving her what she wanted, so why should she stop? In this case, he was right. From that moment forward, I didn't respond to another text from her, and she stopped texting me about 3 days later or so. Her texts didn't change character at the end. She didn't acknowledge that I wasn't responding to her, and didn't seem to change tactics in response to this fact, but they just stopped. I never got another text from her ever. She's actually a really nice person, and very funny and talented, but also somewhat troubled by stuff from her past, to a slightly larger degree than most of us, so I do wish her well, and I've never wished her ill. It was absolutely my most mature handling of a breakup in my life, but also the worst breakup I had. Oh man, so here is some context. Back in 2003, I was a freshman in college living in Dallas, Texas. I, like many of the young people at the time, decided to check out this whole online dating thing that people had been telling me was super effective for older adults. So, I plug in some personal data, answer some questions, post a picture, and we're off to see the wizard. A few weeks into this little experience, I received a message from literally the most attractive woman I had seen within my pool of matches. We're talking a whole 10-mile radius. I honestly thought the profile was fake and some overweight guy named Greg was just catfishing me. But I figured, let's see how far this goes. Jokingly, I tell this woman that I can't wait to meet up with her, and if we hit it off, take her back to my place. And again, let me preface, I was being overtly forward because there was no way this woman was real. As expected, she responds by telling me how forward that is and how she couldn't believe I would say something like that to her. But for some unknown reason, I didn't let up. In fact, I actually purposely told her that I was being forward because I thought that she'd respond to that based on something she said in her profile. Nothing. No response from her for 4 to 5 days. So I figured I could close the book on Greg and move on to other fish in the sea. Friday hits and my inbox has 3 messages, all from this woman. And much to my surprise, she's included her phone number and requested I call her later that night. For further incentive, she has also included 2 scantily clad images for good measure. I mean, how could I not? I had already convinced myself I was being catfished. So I do what any 18-year-old boy on a dating site and a spare Friday night would do. I called her. We talked for literally hours. I explained that I was pretty sure her real name was Greg and that she lives in her parents' sunroom. She explains that she and her brother lived together in a studio apartment and assured me that her name wasn't Greg. Of course, she then sends me several more scantily clad images to my email to assure me further. So there we are, talking, blabbering on, and she had me laughing so much and so loud my sides actually hurt. We were legitimately hitting it off. The noise becomes too much and eventually annoys the hell out of my roommate, so much that he comes into the room and tells me to just ask her out tomorrow so he can get some sleep. I apologize and tell her what's going on, and she agrees to see me the next night. We meet up at a local restaurant close to the downtown area. Fairly expensive, because I kind of want to make an impression, but it's like a family eating establishment casual attire. Not too fancy. I get there 15 minutes early, only to find out that she's already there. When I enter the restaurant, she's in a black dress. Not like a casual black dress, like a fairly revealing maxi cut. Everyone is already staring at her. Servers and restaurant goers alike. I'm wearing jeans and a button-up shirt. The hostess/waitress shows us to a table, and this girl decides that she needs to go to the bathroom before she sits down. So she wanders off. I ask the waitress how long that my date had been, and she tells me that she's been standing around for almost an hour. My date comes back to the table, and before even sitting down orders 2FO the most expensive items on the menu, and assures the waitress that she ordered for both of us. She says, "I'm just being forward. I thought you'd appreciate that." The waitress looks at me. I just laughed and agreed. We sit there, in silence, until I ask her why she had been there for more than an hour. She dodged the question and deflected to talk about the pictures that she had sent me instead. At this point I'm a little confused, but I engage. One question after another, and she's asking me about my roommate and our living situation. I explain we are both working towards our degrees, and then naturally, I ask her about her living situation. She tells me that she and her brother basically live on top of one another, and then makes what I had mistakenly assumed was just an off-the-wall joke about how they sleep together. When I paused at her statement, I asked her to clarify. This is when our food shows up. She instantly gets defensive and starts berating me about judging her relationship with her brother. The poor server is still standing at the table holding my plate. I try and explain that I'm not judging her relationship. I feel like I must have just misunderstood her, because what I had heard is that they have sex with each other. She loses her absolute mind, or it was never there to begin with. Grabs the steak knife in front of her and jams it through the crotch of my jeans. Screams at the top of her lungs and runs, slams into the server, knocking her and my meal to the floor before she flees the restaurant. The server and I stare at each other, neither of us able to comprehend what just happened, but also, I had a knife stuck in the seat of the chair with a nice new hole in my jeans. A fellow restaurant goer helped me retrieve the knife. I was a bit concerned I might have been cut, and the server and her boss chatted about the whole situation. They offered to comp my entire meal, but I paid for both. They replaced the one that was all over the ground, and my roommate and I ate like kings that night. Never heard from her again, but kept meeting online women for 11 years after.